Welcome to the Boat Buyer's Secret Weapon video series. I am your host, Captain Matt, and today we're talking pontoon terms for pontoon shoppers. We're going to go through the terms. We're going to talk about why they're important, what you may hear as you're looking online, talking to dealers and sellers, talking to other boat owners. We're asked to talk about why they're important and what to look for as you are doing your shopping. Of course, we're brought to you by the Boat Buyer's Secret Weapon Toolkit. It is a free gift available at boatbuyerssecretweapon.com/toolkit. It's got a lot of great information, checklists, questions to ask, little organization tools to keep you on track, how to maximize your trade, boat loans, boat insurance, and much more. There's also an ownership calculator, which people really love. So let's start with the difference between a pontoon and a tri-toon. A pontoon has two pontoons on it. A tritoon is a pontoon with three toons on it. So it's kind of like the square is a rectangle, but a rectangle isn't necessarily a square. A pontoon can have two or three toons, but a tritoon has three toons, and it's not a pontoon, something like that. But the third toon is what makes it a tritoon, and there are a lot of performance reasons, of the ability to add extra horsepower, more structural support, 50% more buoyancy, a lot of reasons that they are popular. If you want to go and figure out what's right for you, watch our video, Pontoons and Tritoons, and that will help you there. We'll even link to it up in the top corner. But let's start with the pontoon construction, because there's a lot of pieces in the construction that will be valuable to you to know. And we'll start with the pontoons. You may hear them called pontoons, toons, logs, tubes. All of those are essentially the synonym, for pontoons. The pontoon, couple things to know about it. The first is the diameter of the pontoon, how big around those pontoons are, and the center tube may be different. That center log may be different size than the outer pontoons. The industry standard right now is 25 inches. Some manufacturers will use smaller tubes. Some manufacturers will use larger. There's some 27-inch tubes that are on the market now, and there's even a few manufacturers that are using as large as 32-inch for the center tube to give it different performance handling characteristics. What you want to know is how big around they are and how thick they are, and if they're chambered or not. The chambered toons, the advantage to that is if you puncture a pontoon, if you hit a rock or something like that, only that chamber is going to take on water, and the other chambers will be watertight, meaning that your boat is not going to sink on one side. It's a safety precaution. It also makes them a little bit stronger, having that bulkhead in there, having that baffle in there to separate the tubes, okay? Next in the construction process is to lay down the mounting brackets, the brackets that allow you to put the cross members on and the flooring on. Those mounting brackets, you will see two on each side, and they could be full length, like you see pointing at the yellow arrow, a full bracket that goes the full length of the tube. They're mounted on the top portion, a little bit to the outside, gives you a flat surface to mount your cross members. Couple of things to know about the mounting brackets is, one, you want to know what type of bracket they're using. We'll get to that in the next slide. The thickness and how they are done. Is it a full length bracket, an M bracket that goes all the way down, or are they little sections that may be 2 inches wide and spaced 12 to 16 inches or more, even 24 inches on some boats? What's important to know is that the thicker and the longer the single piece is, the more sturdy, the more stout that pontoon is built, the better it's going to handle rough conditions and not flex. I'll talk about why flex is important in a little bit. Next, after those mounting brackets go on, you have your cross members. Those beams, they're like the joists in your house. The construction gives it something to mount the floor to and to give it support. The type of material that's used, usually aluminum. There's different ways that they do it, but that is going to be set on those cross members and bolted typically, and maybe welded. The thickness of those, The spacing of those, how far apart they are going to be important to know. You can look under the pontoon, and you can typically see those. You may have to, depending on how it's built, you may have to kind of peek through and get the right angle, maybe even get a flashlight out. But a couple things to know. The front of the pontoon is going to take a lot of pounding from the rough water and waves, so you'll want your brackets tighter together there. And the back of the boat is going to take a lot of torque from the engine, so you typically have them spaced tighter together, or have thicker ones in that back section. But again, the more you have, the thicker that you have, the closer they are together, the less flex you will get on your boat. Next, you lay the plywood. Typically, it's going to be 7-layer marine-grade plywood. This is very durable, long-lasting, typically a lifetime warranty, much better than they had 20 years ago when the floors were rotting out on these pontoons. Today, that 7-layer marine-grade plywood is about as good as it gets. There's one manufacturer that's using an aluminum flooring. That's Veranda. They've got a patented process, and their build construction's a little bit different because they are welding their flooring, and they're skipping those cross members. Their flooring doubles as the cross members. The pluses and minuses to that we may talk about when we review Veranda. But this is the way most pontoons are built. Pontoons, brackets, cross members, decking, and that decking may be screwed on or maybe bolted on depending on the way that particular manufacturer does it. What's really important though is the thickness of the material and the gauge of the material are keys to how durable your pontoon is going to be. If you're running on a really rough, choppy water like the Lake of the Ozarks, if you're out in the Intercoastal Waterway or in a bay where it's going to get a little bit choppy, the Great Lakes, that is going to take a certain level of rigidity. If you're running on a small little pond where that you're not getting any rough water, the construction of this portion of it may not be as important. Here's why that flex, I talk about that, is because the flex is going to transfer to that decking, and as you mount the fencing, the furniture, the helm station, the more flex you have of the boat, it's going to flex the furniture. It's going to flex that fencing. And over time, it's going to loosen it. It's going to make it not as rigid and strong, and it's going to break down. The more flex and twist that you have in the deck, the more wear and tear on that furniture just from running it. So that's why flex is important, and over 5 or 10 years, that can cause major issues, major breakdowns, depending on the quality of the other material on the boat. The more rigid the pontoon, the less flex you have, the heavier gauge material you use, the less flex you have, and the more stable, the better the hinges are going to work, the better the doors are going to open and close, the better your bimini top is going to open because it hasn't flexed and started to shift on you over time. On the best end of this, some of the heaviest gauge, the best built pontoon I've been on is a Barletta. They have the most solid feel under your feet, and you can, when you see the material that they use, it makes sense. They have some of the thickest gauge cross members, a full length mounting bracket, and they're doing a great quality construction build. On the other end, you've got the cheaper pontoons, the entry-level model like the Sun Trackers, and they're using spaced bracket every might be 16 to 24 inches. The gauge of the aluminum is a little bit less, but it allows them to sell it for a lower price point, but it's going to have more flex in rough water. If you're not running in rough water, if you're not running super fast, you can get a brand new pontoon with full warranty and invest a lot less. So there's a scale of price to quality that certainly is in play in the pontoon world. So let's look at that construction in a little bit different view of an actual under construction pontoon. The first thing you see is the red arrow, which should be pointing to those brackets. Unlike the full-length bracket in that first image, these brackets are spaced. You can see that they're little 2-inch sections, and they're spaced with each cross member welded on, and then that cross member is bolted. So one thing to look out for when you're looking at a pontoon, to know, is it these space brackets which are less strong, was going to give you more flex, and the full length mounting bracket is sometimes you got to watch out is sometimes they'll put a finishing piece on the side of those brackets that's really just a for looks piece, but it makes it look like it's a full length piece. So you might have to kind of look in there and see if you can see little sections of the bracket that go all the way up to those cross members. Next is the type of cross members that they use. In this image, it's a hat channel, which is kind of a little flange, up, over, down, over. A C channel, which looks like a C, and a Z channel that looks like a Z. Now, a couple things that are important. Extruded aluminum is going to be stronger than bent aluminum. And the thicker the aluminum, the stronger that piece is going to be, right? So you want to ask about how thick that is, the gauge of it, and you want to ask, is it extruded or is it are they bending it? Everybody's going to do it a little bit different. I can't say that one shape is sturdier than another. There's reasons that they use the different shapes, but I can tell you that you'll see each of these listed. In the yellow arrow, that's pointing to the pontoon nose cone. Now, a couple things about the pontoon nose cones. First is the length of the nose cone. The longer the nose cone, the sharper that point, and the more it's going to slice through the chop, versus a shorter nose cone is going to have a wider angle on that V, and it's not gonna slice as much. The next thing that you want to find out is your nose cone braced? Some manufacturers will do a rough water edition where they're actually going to beef up the front of the boat, and one of the ways they do that is they put a cross member in that pontoon to brace it so it's stronger, so you don't take a big wave and crush that pontoon or dent it in any way. The other thing that you want to look for is the weld on those nose cones and all of the welds on the boat. The straighter, the cleaner those welds are, the smoother they are, the better the welder. This is done manually in most situations. They're not building enough boats to make it automated like a Honda factory or Toyota factory. This is a guy with a welder typically welding each section. The better the welds, the less likely you're going to have issues with maybe a weld that's leaking and allowing water in the tube, or a weld that's going to crack over time and allow more flex in the boat. But that nose cone design and strength is going to be key. The other thing, I don't have an arrow pointing to it, but I'll talk about it in this slide, are those little fins. Look like little wings on the nose cone, and those are a splash guard. That's going to knock the water down as you go through the chop. It splashes water up. Those are going to knock it down and keep you from getting as wet in the boat. Again, you can check those welds and the gauge of that aluminum, and it'll give you a pretty good idea of the thickness of some of the other materials that they're using, and compare them back and forth to different boats. That Boat Buyer's Toolkit is a great tool to help with this as you're taking notes on different boats that you're researching. Next, we've got the motor pod, the engine pod, the transom pod. This is where the engine's going to hang. The engine's going to hang off the back on a little bit separate piece. If it's a tri-toon, this may be integrated into that center tune, which is best. And it's going to be bolted and or welded to those cross members. The thicker the gauge of this motor pod, the better. This is going to take a lot of torque. That 200, 300, 400 horsepower engine that you've got hanging off, all of that torque is going to start where this is mounted on that engine pod, and it needs to be nice and sturdy. The smaller the motor, the less worried I am about the thickness of this engine pod, but the higher horsepower, the more this is concerned that you want a nice heavy-duty engine pod. If you're looking at a used boat, you want to really look in this area for any cracks, any broken welds, any areas that looks like maybe they've re-welded a section that's already broke. That's going to be an indication of potentially a problem down the road. Okay, the next thing you're going to look at are going to be on the pontoons. Again, this is under the boat. There's a lot of things under these pontoons that are key. Don't just get hung up on, ooh, I like the layout, because there's a lot of things under the boat that's going to make your enjoyment higher or lower depending on how you're going to use the boat. The first one is the blue arrow. That is a keel. That keel runs the full length of the tube, and it's going to allow you to track straighter as you're going. Imagine running just on that round surface. You don't have anything that's going to guide the boat, and it can be kind of get pushed around by the wind and the waves. That keel is going to hold you straighter in the water, give you a more direct line as you're running. If you're doing some water sports, it'll keep that back end from getting pulled around by a slalom skier. Not completely. It's only an inch or so deep, but it will allow you to track. It's also there to help protect the tube from any underwater obstructions. If you're going to hit a rock or a log or something, that keel the idea is will take most of the impact and avoid a puncture. Now, if you're in saltwater, I've got a saltwater pontoon video that you'll want to check out, but you'll want to make sure that that's solid, a solid aluminum piece, so it's not getting water and growth and barnacles in there, which is going to be a prime spot for corrosion, and then you'll have some major issues on your hand. The next picture on the right with the yellow arrow is a lifting strake. Now, the lifting strake, again, it's a triangle piece. Looks like a little pie piece sticking off there, but it's going to be 2, 3, 4 inches deep, and that is going to allow the boat to get up on plane more like a fiberglass boat with their lifting strakes. The bigger the horsepower, the more usage that these lifting strakes are going to be more valuable. Again, if you're in saltwater, you want to make sure that they're totally enclosed and that no salt water is getting in there to eliminate corrosion. But typically, these lifting strakes are going to be on both sides of the center pontoon if it's a Tritoon, and on the inside of the outside pontoons. That's typically where you're going to see them. If you need these keel or the lifting strakes is going to be depending on how you're using the boat. If you've got a 50 horsepower and you're not really concerned about speed, I may not be too concerned about adding a keel or a lifting strake for sure. As I get up into the 90 and the 115, I'm going to start looking to add that keel so I can get a better track, and starting to add that lifting strake so I can get better performance out of the motor. It will add some top end speed. It will give you a little bit smoother ride because it gets you more on top of the water than plowing through the water. Okay. Next, aluminum skin. You may hear that term. Is the boat skinned underneath? What that is just a thin piece of aluminum sheeting that goes all the way down the center of the boat. And what that's doing is it's protecting the cross members from waves. If you think about it, if you've got your cross members exposed on the underside of the boat and you're hitting some waves, you're going to hit those waves, and those waves are going to catch on those cross members, and it's going to have a chugging effect on your boat. So you may be going 17 miles an hour, and it's going to hit, and it's going to chug you down to 14. You're going to speed back up to 17, it's going to chug again, and it's going to slow you down to 13. And it's just going to be a constant chug, chug. One, it's not good for the boat, but it's really uncomfortable for the rider, and it's annoying. So you put that aluminum skin, now you hit a big wave and it just glances right off that aluminum skin, and no big deal. Now, here's what happens with that aluminum skin is if it's there, now you can't see the under construction of the boat as well, and you'll have to kind of peer through in some of the gaps on the sides and on the back of the boat, maybe in the bow of the boat, and then you can peek under and see what's going on. But this picture with the aluminum skin also shows that finishing piece that's hiding the fact. It looks like, if you look at the tubes, it looks like this is a full-length mounting bracket. In reality, if you look a little closer, you can see the brackets, the 2-inch sections that is actually mounting the pontoons to those cross members. But that finishing piece at first glance makes it look like it's a solid piece. So just look at some of the details. You may need to get under the boat, get a flashlight, and really start looking in if the construction quality is important to you. Next, we've got the bow and the stern. So the bow is the front of the boat, that red arrow. That is the front section of the boat is the bow. The green arrow is the stern, the aft, are the transom of the boat. Those all refer to the back section of the boat. Okay, they're all synonymous. Aft, stern, or transom. Okay, the yellow arrows are pointing to the helm area, the helm station, and the helm chair, or the captain's chair. The helm is where you're going to have the steering wheel, the throttle control, the stereo, the switches. All of that's going to be on the helm. And then the white arrow is pointing to the ski tow bar, which you may or may not have. If you're planning on doing water sports, I recommend that ski tow bar. It makes it much easier to pull a skier or a wakeboarder. You'll want to check with your manufacturer what the weight rating is on that. It may only be 250, 300 pounds, and I would encourage you to avoid pulling a tube from anything that doesn't have over a 500 or 1,000 pound towing capacity, because when that tube takes on water and it fills up, that puts a tremendous amount of stress on that ski tow bar, and they have snapped in half, and that will not be covered by warranty in most cases. So that's the ski tow bar. But let's take a little closer look at the helm. The helm, you can see the throttle, the red arrow. The throttle is the gas and brake pedal, basically, of your boat. So you push it forward, and that goes in forward gear. And then the more forward you push it, it's like stepping on the gas and drive in your car. As you come back, it snaps back in neutral and kind of locks in. And then as you go into reverse, the boat will go backwards. The further back you go with that throttle, the faster you'll go in reverse, just like stepping on the gas in reverse in your car. And that reverse acts as your brake, essentially. Neutral just stops the propeller from turning, but sometimes you'll have to go in reverse a little bit to actually stop your momentum, okay? If you've never run a pontoon before, I'm going to encourage you to get somebody to take you out, show you how to operate it safely. I promise you it'll make your boating more fun and enjoyable and less stressful if you just take a couple of hours and learn your boat yourself, or go out with somebody that knows boating, hire a captain. It'll be time and money well spent to make your boating time more enjoyable and safer for everybody around you. The white arrow points to the depth finder. It's something I encourage people to have on their boats in most situations. It's nice to know if you're running in 10 feet of water, or if you get in a shallow area where you could hit an obstruction, puncture your pontoon, damage your prop or your lower unit. And for $200, I think it's money well spent. On your gauges, you may also have a tachometer, a speedometer, a fuel gauge, a voltage meter, an hour meter. You may or may not have one or all of those. And then that little placard down in the bottom right with the yellow arrow, that is your placard that shows your capacity and your horsepower limit on the boat itself. This is set by the manufacturer. There's a calculation that they need to calculate the buoyancy of the boat, and then they take the average person size that manufacturer is going to use, and they come up with the total capacity for the boat, and then a total capacity for passengers and the number of passengers. Here's what I'll tell you. If you get pulled over by the DNR, wildlife, or shore patrol, it's going to be whichever comes first. So 12 people or 1,692 pounds, whichever comes first. So if it's an adult and 11 kids and you only have 1,000 pounds on there, you're still at your capacity limit. Same thing goes if you have 10 adults that are 200 pounds each. Well, now you're over your capacity limit, even though you haven't hit the number of people. That's how that is interpreted by most law enforcement. You also are going to have a maximum horsepower rating. This maximum horsepower rating is set by the manufacturer, and if you put a 200 horsepower on this boat that's only rated for 150, you can void your warranty. That may come from the manufacturer. It's also going to be unsafe because the boat is not structurally suited for it, or it may not have the capacity to take that extra weight of the motor. So be real careful about overpowering your boat. Look at this placard to see what it says, and that can keep you safe and not voiding your warranty. Then I'll also tell you who the manufacturer is and some other details. You may also see an NMMA, National Marine Manufacturer Association certified, and that means that the boat is built to a standard that NMMA has set, the National Marine Manufacturers Association has set for the right way to build different types of boats. And that's an indication that your boat is built to a certain standard and has been, their specs have been approved. Next, we have the layouts. Now, a lot of people will start with the layouts and say, okay, what do we want? When I look at pontoons, I say there's 3 decisions you need to make. Do you want a pontoon or a tritoon? What horsepower do you want? And then what layout do you want? When you start with the pontoon or tritoon and then the horsepower, it could be a range. I want a 90 to a 115, or I want a 150 to a 250, whatever your budget, whatever your needs are. And then you move to the layout. It's going to help you make the smart decision and not get swept up by buying a pontoon that has the right topside layout, but it doesn't suit your performance needs. Okay, so the terms that you need to know on the pontoons for layout: the traditional L-shaped seating on the left, 2 couches up front, helm station and captain's chair, and then a little L shape in the back. The center walk-through, it's got 2 couches up front, the helm and the captain's chair, and then 2 usually lounger couches in the rear. And that center walk-through, you can walk through the front gate to the back gate, right down the center of the boat. It's a nice open floor plan. It gives you a little bit, what seems like a little bit more usable floor space. The entertaining package, which couches up front typically, a couch section, and then a bar section or an entertainment area in the back of the boat. The single lounge, which I love as well, great for anchoring out and being on the back side of the boat. 2 couches up front, the helm, and then it's got a little flip-flop backrest in the L-shaped seating, which gives you that traditional L-shaped seating when you want it, but then that backrest flips inward, and now you've got a big single lounger that gets you to the water portion, and it really opens up the back of the boat to the water for being coven out, sitting at anchor at the sandbar, and it's a really cool setup. And then your fishing setup, which this one shows 2 fishing chairs and then the live well fishing station, but you also see them with 4 fishing chairs, 2 in the back, 2 in the front, and then maybe a little couch section in the middle. And those are the main ones that you'll see out on the water. So hopefully those terms are now valuable for you, and not only do you know the terms, but you know what to look for and why they're important. If you found this video helpful, we would love it if you gave it a thumbs up. If you left a comment for us, a question, a video that you would like to see, or add your own input. If I missed something, YouTube has recommended some videos for you. The Magic Money Saving Method, you can check that out at boatbuyerssecretweapon.com/save. And you can also grab your toolkit, boatbuyerssecretweapon.com/toolkit, our free gift to you for checking out this video. Thank you very much. Let us know if you have any questions. If you would like to be a guest on the podcast, go to boatbuyerssecretweapon.com/guest. Thanks a lot. We'll talk to you soon.